Welcome back. Thanks for joining me again. Previously, we talked about what are clouds made of. We also talked about what are little girls made of, sugar and spice and everything nice. Well, as we've gone through the other lessons in this section, we've talked about everything from cloud terminology to benefits of cloud and the AWS global infrastructure. So now we're going to talk about that's what clouds are made of. Networking, compute, and storage, which is basically sugar and spice and everything nice. So let's go ahead and jump in. So when we think about the AWS cloud, think about what we previously talked about. We saw that digital diagram that consisted of the AWS global infrastructure. And then within that AWS global infrastructure, we had regions and availability zones. So we don't represent all of that on the diagram. Just know that all of that is what the AWS cloud is made of. Then AWS allows you to create an account. And within that account, one of the first things you do is you set up your networking. It's not the very first thing you do, but it's one of the first things that you do because you need a network in order for you to be able to access any of your other resources. AWS has several different types of networking resources, but a virtual private cloud is the basis for the network infrastructure where you create and manage your resources. Now, keep in mind, we're going to talk about all of these services that you're going to see in much greater detail as we continue to go through the course. But for now, know that AWS Direct Connect allows you to connect your corporate infrastructure, your corporate network, which might be your data center. You're able to connect that with a low latency, high speed connection from your corporate environment to the AWS environment. That's a direct connect connection. Then Route 53 has to do with DNS or domain name services. Domain names are important for how you go to access things on the internet. So think about you want to go to linuxacademy.com. In order for you to access linuxacademy.com, a DNS server has to tell your computer where linuxacademy.com is. That service on AWS is called Route 53. Now, I'm oversimplifying here because there's a lot of things that we're going to continue to talk about, but on a basic level, that's what Route 53 is. So those are a couple of the network services that are provided by AWS. And don't forget, VPCs also fall into that networking category. Then you have your compute resources. So your compute, we talked about being the brains of the operation, right? Computers process information. They use their memory and their CPU to process information. Within AWS, there are several different types of compute services. Two primary ones are EC2, which is a virtual server that you're allowed to set up. They're called instances. And we're going to talk more about those a little bit later as well. And then Lambda is something called serverless. So serverless compute is where you don't have to worry about doing the configuration yourself. So on EC2, you have to install an operating system and then you install your applications. When software updates come out, you have to install those. You manually have to manage that. Lambda is serverless because you don't have to manage those resources. You basically write code that completes a task and you are only responsible for managing that code. AWS manages the underlying compute resources where those functions run. And in addition to compute, we have storage. Storage includes S3, which is a bulk storage service where you can upload files. Think Dropbox or Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive. These are all places where you can bulk upload your files for storage. S3 is the same type of service. And then you have Glacier, and Glacier is for long-term storage. So data that you know that you won't need to have access to frequently, but maybe you need to keep for regulatory reasons, right? Like tax data as an example. You might need to keep it for 5 to 7 years, but you don't need to access it every day. So you put it on long-term storage or on Glacier so that you don't have to pay as much for it as if it was data that you were actively accessing all the time. That type of data you would store on S3. So the basic components that make up a cloud environment are compute, networking, and storage. That's what clouds are made of. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next lesson.